to avoid it. When Jesus calls his disciples to take up their cross and to follow him, you have to understand their reluctance. There had to have been better paths to take. And yet most of us have had times in our lives when we're forced onto this terrible road, that one that winds so painfully through the valley of the shadow of death. When we see that dark way of tears stretching before us, we are tempted to just stand still. Go where? We ask God. Go where? Oh no, not there, not today. Many of us felt that way, I know, 2 weeks ago when we heard of the very unexpected passing of our good friend and church moderator, Tom Aker. I know many of you said when you heard the news you didn't quite know what to do or where to go. And yet a kind of homing beacon led many of us here to this meeting house, to church. When we stood frozen in our grief and shock and asked God that question those women asked, go where? The answer seemed obvious. Go to church. Go to church. Go sit with Christ's living body, his church. As people of faith, we are called together each week to proclaim the resurrection, to share the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love. And that's not a tie that's easily broken, even when our individual hearts may be breaking. And sometimes, this is the miracle of Easter, sometimes we are surprised at the joy that can be found there. When the dawn of resurrection begins to bring us, to lure us safely to the other side of our grief. God's love has a way of flooding into those empty spaces that are carved out of our hearts by sorrow. When those three women get to the tomb of Jesus, you see, their worries were for nothing. The stone had already been rolled away, and a strange young man in white was sitting there, and he startles them by speaking out of the dark. He said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. But he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him, just as he told you." Go where? Those women had to be asking themselves. Go where exactly? Go to Galilee to see Jesus? Go home? As they stumbled away in fear, you have to wonder if something like a homing beacon began to dawn on them. If their shared experiences with Jesus in happier times somehow did draw them back to the streets of Galilee, where they had first come to know and to love Jesus. And perhaps there they finally found the words to begin to tell the story of that morning to a trusted friend, a friend like Peter. Peter, after all, was the rock. Peter would reassure them. Peter, they knew, would never have run away in fear as they had done. I wonder, don't you, when those women told him their shameful story, of running away. I wonder, did he confess to them that he had denied Jesus 3 times on that dark night of the crucifixion? We all run away in fear at one time or another in our lives. We all sin and we all fall short of the glory of God. But Easter turns all of our worldly expectations inside out, where we fear and dread death and punishment. We instead find grace and new life. Like the women approaching the tomb, we may come to church out of religious duty, but we may go forth surprised by the hope that is born inside us, by the very real and present sense of hope that the living Christ offers us. Like St. Paul, none of us is a perfect saint. Paul, we remember, at one time not only had failed to embrace Christianity, but he had actively worked to get Christians killed. So surely we can share his amazement that God could still use his gifts to tell the story. When we stand to sing together, to proclaim the good news of Easter once again, we may feel a little shaky, a little unworthy, a little afraid. But we stand in a long line of Christians who have been telling and retelling this story for generations, still trembling and in awe of the great mystery before us. Like them, in spite of our faults, we see and we proclaim Jesus alive again in our shared life together in the church as his risen body. Go where, we may ask? Go to church. And after that, take the good news out into the world where you go. Share with others the good news of God's grace. People of faith, you have heard the good news of Easter once again. He is risen. Where do you go now? Where do you go to find him? Ordinary Christians like us are the ones called to carry the light of the living Christ within us, to love our enemies, to reach out and befriend the friendless, encourage the discouraged. Whether it is in a pub after work with friends or in a church fellowship group, we ordinary Christians are called to listen to one another's confessions and to strengthen the faint-hearted. Whether it's in a grocery store parking lot or in a church committee meeting, we Christians are called, ordinary Christians like us, to give counsel, to give comfort in the name of Christ. Even our children in church learn early how to welcome the stranger and befriend the outcast. The new kid nobody wants to play with will see Jesus Christ in our children out there in school when they offer a kind smile or reach out a hand on the playground in friendship. It's no small thing, the work and ministries of an ordinary Christian church like ours. Like those first disciples, we are called to a mission too. We are called to go out there to our own Galilean countryside and transform the world as we have been transformed by the power of divine love, stronger even than the power of the grave. Thanks be to God for this good news. Amen.